The zombies in this movie are very intelligent. Besides riding horses and using weapons, they also know martial arts. Even felines have been infected. Las Vegas became infested with zombies and had to be sealed off from the world. The only solution to the problem was to bomb this quarantine zone. The most surprising part was that the zombie king figured out on his own how to reproduce, and the zombie queen became pregnant. It all started when a newlywed couple, driving distractedly, collided with a military truck transporting a secret biological weapon. Since the contents were highly classified, not even the soldiers knew what they were transporting. They could only report the situation to their superiors. When their superior learned that the container had been damaged, they were instructed to flee. However, their curiosity was too strong, and in a moment of carelessness, the zombie named Zeus escaped and infected a soldier. The others opened fire, but it was no use. The zombie kept attacking. One soldier was literally left speechless with shock, while another decided that if he couldn't beat them, he should join them. So the zombie and his new ally headed for a major city, Las Vegas, which overnight turned into complete chaos, making everyone abandon their gambling addictions. The situation got out of control, and the army was sent in to intervene, but they all ended up becoming zombies as well. After 6 days and 6 nights of futile bombings, the president ordered the area to be sealed off with containers to prevent further deaths, and that a nuclear bomb be launched in 4 days to wipe Las Vegas off the map. However, a Japanese millionaire became worried because he had $200 million in cash in a vault in the city. Desperate, he sought out Scott, a zombie-killing expert. However, Scott was out of action, now selling hamburgers, as the last zombie he killed was his own wife, a trauma that haunted him. Because of this, his relationship with his daughter suffered, and he wasn't interested in anything else except selling burgers. However, the millionaire offered to split the money with him if he could recover the fortune, and Scott began to consider the proposal. Friends and family quickly formed a team to take on this dangerous mission, and its members were quite varied. There was Vandero, famous for his love of chainsaws, a digital influencer named Guzman, who gained fame by killing zombies, although lately, his videos were being taken down due to complaints, and a specialist in opening any kind of lock, Dieter, essential for cracking vaults without whom the mission would be impossible. The helicopter responsible for evacuation only needed a single bamboo propeller, as Peters was an excellent pilot. There was a blonde woman named Lily who served as a real human GPS in zombie territory. There was also the bodyguard Martin, sent by the millionaire, though he had his own interest in the mission. Among the team members was Cummings, hated by everyone, who was included at Lily's suggestion, claiming his presence would somehow be useful. When everything seemed ready for the mission, Scott's daughter, Kate, showed up out of nowhere, demanding to be taken along with a rather absurd reason. Her best friend had snuck into the zombie area 2 days earlier in search of treasure, and had not yet returned. Upon learning that the zombie king was known for being lecherous, Kate became extremely worried. She threatened her father, telling him to take her along for protection, or she'd go alone and end up getting bitten by a zombie. Either way, she was going to rescue her friend, so Scott had to decide. Faced with this situation, he had no choice but to agree. As soon as the team entered Sin City, they encountered one of the most feared creatures in the world, a tigress. Strangely, even after seeing the humans, the tigress didn't attack the group. While everyone was confused, Lily quickly took action, shooting Cummings. It turned out that after Zeus founded his kingdom, he established a rule. Humans could enter his territory as long as they offered a sacrifice. In this way, when Cummings was tied up, the zombie queen appeared in person. She was the zombie king's favorite, who shared his affection among several concubines, and she was already pregnant with the heir to the throne. The zombie queen seemed very pleased with the sacrifice as she walked toward them happily. With that, the team resumed their journey, but the real problem was still ahead. The path was completely blocked by a horde of sleeping zombies, and if any of them were awakened, everyone would die. Scott decided to lead the group, throwing glow sticks on the ground to mark the path. Everything seemed to be going well until the bodyguard sent by the millionaire decided to stir up trouble. He threw one of the glow sticks into a dead-end alley. As a result, he woke up the entire nest of zombies, creating a huge problem for one of the women. This was simply because Martin didn't like her. With no other choice, the influencer fired at a gasoline barrel strapped to the woman's body, causing an explosion that, despite his tears, allowed the group to escape. With the problem temporarily solved, they finally reached the target building, which had once been a casino. The group split up, Scott and his daughter took care of refueling the generator to restore the building's power, while Peters climbed to the roof to repair the abandoned helicopter. Vandero and Guzman accompanied the lock specialist to the vault, while the bodyguard and Lily kept watch. However, they soon encountered the zombie queen and her assistant, who were only curious to see what these intruders were doing in their territory. However, the bodyguard didn't hesitate to attack directly, immobilizing the zombie queen. Her loyal assistant tried to protect her, but ended up being killed by Lily. The next scene left Lily completely shocked as Martin used a steel wire to decapitate the zombie queen. It turns out that this was his real purpose in the mission. The Japanese millionaire who sent him wasn't interested in the $200 million stored in the casino. The true prize was the zombie queen's head, as it would allow him to develop more biological weapons. Lily knew the zombie king wouldn't let this slide, so she and Martin fled quickly. As expected, Zeus arrived shortly afterward. Seeing the decapitated body of his partner, he was overcome with unbearable pain, especially with the death of his unborn child. He swore vengeance and began to gather his army. Meanwhile, the team was still unaware of the imminent danger. They finally reached the vault, and as Dieter had predicted, the room was filled with security traps. To disarm them, they tricked an elderly zombie into triggering the traps. However, the zombie, who seemed very loyal to his leader, chose to take a shot to the head rather than be used by the group. With no other option, the team found a younger, clearly inexperienced zombie who seemed to have just transformed and didn't yet understand what was happening. Everything was going according to plan. The zombie was used to activate the traps, and since he was immortal, he had no difficulty. However, he ended up being crushed in the end. Once the traps were activated, it was time for the lock specialist's big moment. In just half an hour, he managed to unlock the world's most difficult lock. When the door opened, an enormous pile of money appeared before them, confirming that the millionaire had indeed told the truth. However, while they were busy grabbing the money and planning their escape, they didn't notice that Scott's daughter had slipped away, determined to find her friend on her own. Meanwhile, the zombie king was already mounted on his warhorse and had gathered his army to attack the building where the team was located. The first victim of the attack was Maria, Scott's former combat partner, who was also in love with him. Unfortunately, before they could develop any relationship, she was killed by zombies that invaded the place. Scott acted quickly, but was soon surrounded by zombies skilled in martial arts. The rest of the team began to escape through other routes, but the bodyguard, who had already secured the zombie queen's head, didn't care about the money and decided to abandon the group, even locking the escape route. Lily had to use Vander Rohe's chainsaw to cut a new escape route through the wall. However, this delay was fatal as Vander Rohe and Dieter were surrounded by Zeus and his alpha zombies. Zeus wore a mask to protect his only weak spot. The two ran out of ammo, forcing Vander Rohe into hand-to-hand combat, but the zombie king was incredibly strong and no ordinary human could defeat him. When Zeus was about to bite Vander Rohe, Dieter, in a courageous act, used all his strength to push his companion into the vault and, before dying, locked the door to protect him. Meanwhile, Martin had already escaped but quickly realized that the zombie queen's head he wanted so badly had been swapped without his noticing. Before he could do anything, the infected tigress silently appeared behind him, and the man was attacked and brutally killed by the animal. On the other hand, Scott used his vast experience and physical strength to fight his way through the horde of zombies, but the digital influencer wasn't as lucky and ended up being bitten. His fate was already sealed. Accepting his death, he looked at the money flying through the air and decided to detonate the grenades he carried, sacrificing himself to ensure Scott and Lily's escape. The two reached the rooftop where the pilot was still finishing repairs on the helicopter, but Zeus managed to reach them. With no other options, Lily grabbed the zombie queen's head and used it to threaten the zombie king. Surprisingly, this worked, as Zeus had deep feelings for the queen. This bought Scott enough time to board the helicopter and try to escape. When Zeus realized what was happening, he reacted immediately, but it was too late. Lily saw that the situation was lost, so she threw the zombie queen's head off the top of the building, where it hit the ground and shattered. Scott and Peters could have taken the chance to flee, but Scott remembered that his daughter was still missing. He needed to find her, but there were only 10 minutes left before a nuclear bomb would be launched. Although Peters wanted to punch Scott, she was his old friend and eventually gave in. Meanwhile, Kate, guided by her feminine intuition, actually managed to find her best friend hiding. However, when they tried to escape, they ran straight into the army led by Zeus. They advanced, and Kate managed to take down a few zombies. This also gave Scott a clue about where to look for his daughter, and he arrived just in time to stop the zombie king from killing her with a precise grenade launcher shot. They barely managed to escape. As soon as they got on the helicopter, they thought everything was finally over, but Zeus wasn't dead. Peters took off quickly, but the zombie king wasn't going to let them go. He jumped in a last attack and managed to grab onto the helicopter. Scott engaged in combat with him, but in the middle of the fight, an accidental shot hit the pilot. Zeus had immense strength and easily broke Scott's arm. Meanwhile, instead of grabbing a gun, Kate decided to use a fire extinguisher in an attempt to crush Zeus, which indirectly led to her father being infected. To make matters worse, the nuclear bomb had already been launched, and an intense white light illuminated the sky, followed by a huge mushroom-shaped cloud rising into the air. When he regained his vision, Scott grabbed the gun and shot the zombie king in the head. Right afterward, the shock wave hit the helicopter, making it lose control and crash. A short time later, Kate woke up from unconsciousness and realized that Peters and her best friend were dead. Only her father was still breathing, but he had been infected and was about to turn. In his final words, Scott said he had this mission to leave a legacy for Kate, never imagining that she would risk her life for her friend, and that this would end up costing everyone their lives. In the end, father and daughter overcame years of conflict, but sadly, she had to take her father's life. Meanwhile, Vander Rohe, who had been locked in the vault by Dieter, survived. Although the vault wasn't theft-proof, it withstood the nuclear explosion. He carried several bags of cash until he found a car, which he used to get to the airport, where he even rented a private jet. A flight attendant flirted with him, and he thought he had finally reached the peak of life, ready to enjoy his newfound wealth. However, he began to feel increasingly tired, and a sense of dread took over. Looking at his arm, he saw a horrible bite. The zombie extinction was not complete, and that's how the movie ends. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe for more stories like this.